So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, and just wanted to dig a little deeper into a few of the topics that we kind of touched on a little bit. And one of them that I'm thinking about is, when did you feel that you had earned the right to be the CEO of Playboy, or to take the position that you had, that you knew you could do it, and not because you were your father's daughter? Did that ever kind of haunt you at all, or did you always feel confident that you could do it?
Well, when I put myself forward to become president when the company was in crisis, I think that was a classic example of disproportionate confidence for experience, or a WTF moment.
Yes, I get that.
And I don't remember having doubt about it. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the interesting things about kind of life is I find there's an inverse relationship between knowledge, experience, and humility. So I have much more humility now, even though I know a great deal more than I knew then. And I actually think a good part of effective leadership is the right balance between confidence and humility.
I love that.
But I also think, I took over at a time when it was a crisis. And so it was kind of like I didn't have the luxury of doubt. Now, I do remember something my father said to me that was reassuring, which was that while we were still kind of in the middle of the turnaround, he said to me at one point, "I want you to know I sleep better at night knowing you're in this job."
I read that and I loved that. And that is so true. And I think of even the people that work at Edlong that I have said that to them, thinking of the Ken Macks and the Lloyds and my operations team. And it's very true. I sleep better because I know they're doing their job. And one time my dad gave me a card. He was really good at birthday cards and flowers on birthdays and write very deep one-liners. But he wrote me a card that said, "You have taught me so much." Whew.
That's powerful.
That was huge.
But what I would say about the subject is I remember speaking to a group of people in YPO. So I was the first woman elected to the Chicago chapter. At the time, there's only one of YPO.
Yes.
And I did various things with YPO for a number of years. But at one point, they had an event where the YPO members, and these are their like young adult children, so these are not kids, came over to the Playboy offices, toured the art collection, and then, I gave a little talk and then answered questions. And one of the young men said, "Do you think it's a good idea to go work for your father, to go into a family business?" And I said, there's no one answer to that question. It's very personal.
Right.
The one thing I will say is, if it's going to bother you, if anyone sometime thinks, never mind says, that the reason you're in that job is because your father founded the company, then you shouldn't go into the company, because someone will for sure think that, if not say that.
Absolutely.
What my attitude about that is that I concluded that the vast majority of people would judge me based on what I did with the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And the people who weren't willing to give me that, then their opinions just didn't matter to me.
Exactly. And I think it's something that comes with maturity. At least I remember doing like Edlong employee surveys, and I'd get one little ding and it would bring me to my knees, and my dad would be like, "Oh, you're not going to get everybody all the time, and you really have to get a little tougher on that." How do you manage boundaries? And I imagine for you, people really, Christie, come speak here. Christie, come do that. How do you manage your energy, manage where you spend your time? What's kind of the criteria you go through when you think this is time well spent? Because I imagine that could get crazy for you.
There was a research project that McKinsey did a few years ago about energy that I found very compelling. And they were starting just to figure out what distinguished highly successful women from women who were not as successful professionally. And the going in hypothesis was it was going to be this kind of work-life balance that gets talked about all the time. And
which is impossible.
Well, also not relevant, frankly.
Right.
What was highly relevant was that the women who were very successful had definitely understood the necessity of finding balance between the time they spent that energized them and the time they had to spend that enervated them. And that has nothing to do with whether it's work or your family. The truth
Right.
is, hopefully,
Do what
much
you
of your
love.
work is very exciting and the time goes by and you are just so jazzed.
We just
And there's
learned
time
of
with your family that can be kind
Exhausting.
of exhausting.
Yes.
So finding that balance, I think, is really essential. And you have to
Yeah.
find what are the things that give you energy and joy, whether it's working out or walking outside or listening to music or cooking or travel or time with girlfriends.
Nourish your soul kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I totally agree. We learned about a new book called Six Geniuses, and it comes under the Traction EOS system. And you take this quick test and it talks exactly to what you're speaking of. When you spend the majority of your time in your green, so I'm galvanizing and wonder, which, and it kind of matches with other personality tests we've taken. Like, I'm definitely dreamer, visionary. I am not the one that's going to get it across the finish line. I am not the detail person, and when I have to spend too much time down there, that's a long day. But if you're in your green, your days are energizing. And exactly, that could be with family, friends, what have you. I think that's very true. And to try to put your energy where you find the joy.
But I also think, to your question, it is really important to know how to say no. For any of us at any point. And sometimes it's hard if you're the kind of person who likes to help, likes to please. Sometimes I think it's possible to find ways to say no that still allow you to be helpful in some way. So, for example, while I'm on the board of Rush University Medical Center and I'm on the board of the leading progressive think tank in Washington, generally speaking, I don't do nonprofit board work anymore. I've done a lot of it. It's not something I choose to do at this point. However, if I'm asked to go on the board of a nonprofit that I care about and I think is doing important work, like documentary films, which CMP does, or the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, or the New Press, or whatever, I will decline the invitation to go on the board, but I will say, that doesn't mean I won't help you. So I'll go to lunch with you and help you find potential directors or strategize about who you could collaborate with or how to put in place a campaign for raising additional funds. So sometimes you can decline the particular ask and still do something that's helpful.
How many women do you mentor? Or is it not only just women, but I know that's one of the things that you're doing right now. Do you do one-on-one?
I honestly only mentor one woman who's become a friend. She reached out to me. We were talking about this the other day. Actually, 15 years ago, wrote me a cold letter when I was still running Playboy and said, I've read about you. I would love, to have you in my life. She was a rising executive at Google. And I wrote back and I said, I don't do mentoring, but if you want to come to the office, I'll have a cup of coffee with you. And if there are questions I can answer that would be helpful, that would be fine. And that's how it started. And then she was very wise in making the requests very manageable. And now, maybe 5 times a year we have breakfast and we talk about her career and we talk about, choices. What I like to do, which I don't call mentoring, because I think mentoring, at least in my mind, has to have some longevity to it, is I'm always there to help people. And I particularly like helping people, particularly women, but not exclusively, when they're at a transition. So when they're contemplating a next chapter. And having done that now a lot, I think I've learned some things that then can be helpful that I can pass on.
Right. Yeah, I mentored a C200 woman.
Good for
so
you.
I signed up for that, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was really a fulfilling experience, and I hope she's doing well. I haven't talked to her in a while. I'm like, stay in touch,
Right.
So that was great. Okay, Christie, a couple quick questions for you. So what is a book that impacted your life?
Katharine Graham's personal history. So I knew her. She was very gracious to me when I was just starting out. And she wrote a really soul-bearing autobiography in the late 90s. And I think the fact that a lot of what she grappled with had to do with issues I care deeply about in terms of freedom of the press and standing up to the powerful made it more powerful for me. But it's also just a beautifully written book about a woman who people didn't expect much of, who just was a giant.
Okay, so what is one of your rituals that you might do in the morning, if you have any?
I have a pretty simple morning. I walk to my office and I stop on the way and get a double skim latte at Starbucks. And that's my morning ritual.
A movie that's impacted your life?
Well, what I would say is my father's favorite movie was Casablanca. And he screened it every year on his birthday for his friends. And everybody dressed up, the men in white jackets and the women in gowns. And then after the movie, they turned the dining room into Rick's Cafe with champagne and caviar. And so for
cute.
that reason, Casablanca has a special place in my heart.
Like it. Are you a Bears fan?
I am.
Me too.
Although they've made it
Die
very
hard.
hard.
They really do. God love them. But this is a foundational year. We're coming back.
We'll see how we navigate the draft.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a sheer pleasure. And
Mine too.
I appreciate your time and your friendship so much. So thank you.
You're welcome.